just wrapped with Michael here from Antler. We had an amazing conversation. I think if you're interested in VC entrepreneurs, if you are thinking about like starting your own stuff, you get a lot of interesting and tangible insights. Hear about Michael's journey, what he invested in, what to do, which pitches works, which doesn't. So tune in on the channels where you usually listen and watch your podcasts.
Second clap.
Yeah, we're live.
Perfect.
Michael, thank you for coming today.
Thank you. I've been really looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's been, we're trying to get it sorted for a while. You are now in the VC game, but you've been, your entrepreneurial path, you've been in consulting, you're now like invested in like 100 different companies here in Denmark. What are you most excited about right now?
I think sort of generally just get excited about fantastic people, fantastic entrepreneurs, fantastic founders, and supporting them with their first steps of the journey. That's what really excites me, is working with people. Because
that's what Antler is doing a little bit, right? You're looking at founders and then trying to invest in an idea. Is that?
Yes. I mean, we are day zero investors. We're your first investors into your company, which means that we also run residencies where you can come and find your co-founders. So we run 3-month residencies where you can come as an individual with your idea, but you're potentially lacking a co-founder, some sparring, network, etc. And then we have in Denmark, roughly every 6 months, we have about 50 entrepreneurs that walk through our doors, and we try to help them find each other or find them if they're already a team of 2 and then searching for a third co-founder, help them find that. And if they're already a complete team, then we basically just help them, but help them from the very initial part of their journey, become the first investor on their cap table, and then support them with our global setup, like our Nordic and global setup. We can support them all the way to Series C in terms of investment, capital advice, network, etc.
Nice. And I think that's pretty interesting because like it feels like almost you're an idea kind of guy or girl, or you're like an execution kind of guy or girl. And when I talk to people, they're either like, I'm just, like I have so many ideas. Like I'm an idea guy. I have a list in my iPhone that just goes down from everything from ice cream as a service, the top-notch ideas, to like retirement plans of, there's a gap in the Greek market in golf courses. There's only 9, golf courses in the entire Greece, and everything between those two. But when I talk to like the tech people, they're more like, just tell me what I should build. Like where is the, what's the ratio, what do you see when they walk into the door?
Fundamentally, I think if you have the best entrepreneurs are also people that come up with great ideas, and because you got to look at things and challenge it in a different way. So you can't just say and sit, like you can't have like one person on the team sit and say, like being the idea person and then telling the other person what to build if you're the tech person. So I think you need to be both entrepreneurial in how you think, because it's you're thinking about new ideas, you're going out trying to validate them, and then you go back and build it. But then it's also validation in the building and shipping a product and figuring out how do customers engage with the product, and then do they churn or do they come back, and like when do you find product love? And that's also not something that you can just like give from one founder to the other. It has to be sort of the full team that thinks about what, like the sort of getting excited about building new things and bringing it to market and testing new things. So you can't, I would say it's both, and you're right on the execution part. At least that's like one of the things. You have to be really, really good at executing, because especially in the very early days when you're like a small team, you're doing everything, and you have to like push so many different things at the same time to make a company work from the get-go.
Okay, so it's just that I know more business-leaning people than tech-leaning people, that I feel like there's a gap and a lack in the market of people that can actually code and do these things. That's just my network is just more tilted towards that.
I think that's totally fair, right? When I came out sort of initially, just before I started out in sort of the whole building companies and tech and investing eco space, came from consulting, sort of a strategy consulting, and back then I knew very few people that were building startups, or like even sort of with the commercial mindset of building startups. Now that shifted, and then I got to know a bunch of commercial people that build, and now like through what we're trying to then help is like people like me, my old me, that were building startups but needed a technical co-founder. We're trying to bring a lot of people together with diversified skill sets, so you have the opportunity to come and find the complementary skills to what you need when building your startup.
Yeah, and what is the biggest, like you must have so many, if you have 50 entrepreneurs coming, like you must, how many companies do you spit out then in this, amongst these 50 is like
So we our funnel roughly looks that we get more than 1,000 applications per half year, which we then interview in a couple of interview sessions, and then we have the top 50 entrepreneurs that we bring in. We work with them for a period of up to 12 weeks. We start investing as soon as they're ready to invest. We'll invest, so we don't want to wait 12 weeks. If we want them to just go and execute and build traction. So if they're ready after 4 weeks for an investment, we'll invest after 4 weeks. And then after those 12 weeks, we roughly invest in, the last time we invested in 6 companies with 13 founders in the founder group. So 2 in 5 of them and 3 in 1 of them. So that's sort of the rough ratio, investing in about 20 to 30% of the people we bring in.
Okay. And there's, there's some math equations as well, right? If you get to seed, this is what, pre-seed, is ID seed? I don't know, like it's very early investing. What, do you have any statistics even on like how many people in your cohorts that is making it to like, let's say a Series A, or like any statistics there that could be a little bit interesting?
Exactly. I mean, I think we're still like in Denmark. We're 3 years into our journey here, so we haven't made quite 100 investments yet, but we've made about 40. So it's a little bit early to sort of bring out those statistics, but we are trying to. Our key goal is to help them get obviously to Series A, and then sort of with that's sort of our local Nordic focus, you can say, and then above and beyond that with our global focus. Of course, we want the companies to grow into unicorns and raise after us as well. But if we get as many companies as possible to Series A, we see the statistics of us succeeding as a fund and returning the fund to our investors multiple times being great.
So on a global scale, do you have any like benchmarks that are like out of 100 companies that is starting out to be a company like X succeeds?
I think actually when you look at Antler and like look at it, we're building obviously a lot of stats. We've now invested in 1,400 companies across the globe, but we're also still just 6 years into the Antler journey. So we're, you can say most of our ecosystems are quite young yet. So we're still to see the stats on that more progressed cohorts.
Because previously, at least before the markets were flushed with cash, then I think you had a median time to IPO around like 10, 11 years. Now I think it takes a little bit longer, and also it seems like the expectations of the results in a pre-IPO company is much higher now than it was just like 3-4 years ago, right? So I guess that 6 years, 5 years ago could have had more statistics. But do you see, out of the 40 companies, is there any that you can see some trends that these people succeeded, or these people, because I'm sure you're already trying to narrow that down in the interview process, right?
Yeah.
So what are you looking for when you're then trying to like optimize for success, I guess?
I think we look for, again, what we like, quote unquote, we'll call great entrepreneurs, people that are very resourceful in thinking very fast and executing, very good at, fundamentally after us, they have to go out and raise the next round of funding as well, right? So they have to be really good at sort of presenting their case, selling what they're doing. At this very early stage where they might pivot still, it's more about their ability to persuade and understand like the problem at hand that they're working on, and sort of like the sort of next the first principles thinking of getting like to the very bottom of what that problem is, and making sure that they're not just scraping the top of that problem. There's not really something they haven't understood their customer's problem, and they don't know whether it's sort of a real problem they're solving, or people actually really willing to pay for this. And are they able to sort of articulate all of these questions and understand all of these things that they have to go out and figure out? If you get someone like that, and then I think also people that, and then now we get into sort of more after we've done interviewing. Of course, we sit with them for 12 weeks. So we get to see them execute over a period of 12 weeks. So that's probably more of our final due diligence before we invest. And that's where we can see a lot of these things. And also, how do they move forward sort of week over week? What is the traction that they're bringing back to us? And it's not necessarily like traction in terms of how many users do they have, revenue growing or anything, because it's this early, but it's more like, how do they go out, take their idea and iterate on that? And if you challenge them on something, do they then solve that to like next week? And then, by the way, not just solving that, but solving like 3 other things as well that they've thought about whilst they were challenging this? Or does it take them 3 weeks to get back to something like this? Or do they never, by the way, get back on that issue? And that's obviously how we then end up also selecting the companies we invest in.
Who is the poster boy for Antler now? Like when you need to have someone on stage, who do you bring up?
In Denmark, in the Danish portfolio, it varies, right? Because we're an agnostic investor, so we invest in lots of different industries, anything from your classic B2B SaaS, fintech, health tech, B2C, and we even do some physical products as well. Obviously, thinking that they can still scale to unicorn potential. So it varies in terms of like who we're trying to, like, what is the setting and what is the stage of who we're bringing out. We have a bunch of fantastic entrepreneurs, so it's more like, do they want someone who's like native Danish speakers or English speakers, or do you want B2B or like sustainability?
I think I saw one of my ex colleagues and friends started in a Norwegian company that did something like radar detection to get birds away from windmills or something like that.
Spore.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
It's super cool. It's a company. So essentially, on when you're building and setting out to build wind farms offshore, you're looking into birds and how they move around and fly, and making sure that you're not sort of killing biodiversity. And so they've made a company that does sort of AI monitoring for cameras, and then they monitor how sort of biodiversity moves in the area before you build a wind farm, and or when they have wind farms built. So a very cool company, also co-invested by a Danish energy company, Ørsted. So a super cool company.
Did you study microeconomics when you were in school?
A bit. It's a long time ago, though.
Yeah, same. But I used to remember that it's like what is the impact of the owl species on this motor highway, and if we can, justify. I'm like, that's what I'm thinking when I heard that. Like, how can that equation be easier for that person that needs to get that approval for that wind farm in the.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, obviously we have lots of companies growing. Again, you got to think about like if Antler is 6 years old, and like us building out our global footprint and everything, and setting up like local offices in the last 6 years, and like the number, like the cases we built. Many companies are still very young in our portfolio, but growing rapidly and getting like very cool co-investors on board as we speak.
And I guess one of the most common question is like whether or not you should do VC or funding or not. Like what's like when people are asking you that, like, what's your go-to answer?
I think it depends on what do you like. First of all, what is the problem you're solving? Is this problem, quote unquote, VC backable? Can you build that into that unicorn in the time frame of 7 to 10 years? Do you want to do that even? It's like it's kind of a red pill or a blue pill almost right now. I know you can do a bit of just raising your seed and then do bootstrapping after that. So seed strapping, like that's becoming a growing trend. But it is almost like if you're taking VC money in, you're sort of set out to that unicorn journey. So do you want to do that? Question mark. Is the business or the problem you're trying to solve, is that big enough to do that? So that's so a couple of the things.
Can you become a unicorn?
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah.
Like, is the market big enough?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then sort of personal preference. Do you want to do that? I mean, obviously getting VCs on board is like also you're getting some expectation from people that want to go and see you really grow fast and grow to a big company. So is that aligned with what you want to do, or do you rather want to build a profitable business where you sit and sort of like have more control yourself? That's obviously some of the questions you got to ask yourself about.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past there was like saying like, oh yeah, if you can, double every year, like then. But now it's like you need to triple the first 3 years and then double the second 2. Then you're like in a VC path. But what I always think is a little bit interesting and like triple from 0. Like what does that? That's triple from 1.
Yeah.
Like it's like, how do you define then success there? Like it's
I think, very early on, it's much more about finding your, quote unquote product market fit, and like shipping your product to some people and seeing like someone loving your products. It's more about like finding like the first 10 buying customers that use your product a lot, or 100 or whatever, depends on what you're building, but finding those customers that really love to use your product. And then sort of like when you do find that, then you do see this, and find that product market fit is like as defined. I think it was, I forget who it was that said, but like when you cannot put up servers fast enough to like deliver the product, and or you cannot produce fast enough to deliver your product, right? It was probably pre-cloud days when that comment came out, but nevertheless, point is still like when you have product market fit, right? And it's like if you find that and you really get that, make that happen well, then growth will come fast enough, and then it's more that I think more looking into again it's growth rates, but it's from like the very early stages. It's different. It's more about getting to the first, like then do you get to $10,000 or euros in MRR, or like 100,000, and then you look from it. So it varies at different stages of.
And I guess that like if you have a company, like I'm just thinking about myself now. Like I'm starting. 2 companies at once, which is always great. Never tell a VC that. But I have clients that are loving it, but I also don't have like if I would take VC money now, I wouldn't have a capacity to use it. Because it's just great, I have more money to spend, but I don't have bandwidth to spend it. So I guess is it? You said seed strapping, but do you see people bootstrapping and then raising when they get like more to product market fit and then take like the VC route, or like how do you see the different? For example, what is seed strapping first of all?
I mean, I think it's like taking your seed round and from there on using that capital to become profitable and then build your business from there, right? So I think. Probably being a bit more tight with money that came in the last sort of a little bit of a VC winter that was a while ago, where it was like super hard to raise capital and you had to be a lot more capital, like think about how you used your money. And VCs also advised a lot of companies to become profitable, right? Because you could then control your own destiny.
Yeah.
So whether you then bootstrap and then take some VC money, of course, the longer you can go without taking VC money, the better you can, like your equity is sort of it has a price to it, right? And it's like what you're selling, and it gets a higher value when the further you've gotten. So if you found product market fit, if you can scale, if you can get to 10,000 MR, 100,000 MR. So I think the challenge then sometimes is also one thing for founders to consider is the time it'll take you to get there. Like, could you have gotten there? I always talk to our founders about the opportunity cost of their time. Their time is probably their most valuable asset, and it's if you can get some money and figure out this hypothesis and like whether that can fly in a year with like investing in the right things you need to do versus spending 3 or 5 years on your life bootstrapping, not taking anything in, then I mean you could like if you don't succeed in the first go, you still have like 3 more shots at goal if it's like 1 year versus 3 years. So hey, is the increased ownership worth that to you? So it's a sort of a risk return. Of course, if you have the funds, if you're like debt set and your idea can work and you can execute super fast, then maybe worthwhile bootstrapping. But else, definitely a good option to put some a bit more speed into your journey and minimize your opportunity cost of time.
Yeah, I think it's my frugalness that also kicks in sometimes, because I'm looking like, okay, if I give, if I'm getting to 100K MRR, or 10K MRR, like it's for each milestone, my equity that I give away will just go smaller and smaller. And if I'm, and the business I'm building is not VC backable because it's not big enough. So then it's like I can go angel route, right? I can because they will. Can give them 3 to 5x return, they will be happy to take that. But that's when to do that is definitely a little bit of an interesting.
Exactly. And I think it becomes back to this, like if you're, of course, again, you have to, to get VC money, you have to think about building a unicorn, like something that's the size of that, or a decacorn even. So if you're building that, but then it becomes a matter of the likelihood of building that, if you get some capital to succeed along the way versus if you bootstrap and then maybe you run out of cash or something happens or whatever. So it's like you got to weigh the pros and cons of what you're doing and how much equity you're selling along the way.
Yeah, but it's almost different. Like it's the same sport, but it's like different. I don't know. No, it's not the same. It's like almost like different games. Like it's business, but we're playing in different divisions. Like it's and the outcome of the winning is completely different, and it's only defined by you. Like so you can say like, because you could do really poor capital allocation and then work 10 years in the VC route and do the triple and and then still end up with not having that exit that you need in order to get a payout as a founder. Like that's especially like in the 21 craziness. That's the people that raised then for the valuations on the multiples there they're probably struggling a little bit now, don't you think?
There are definitely some. There's definitely some of the companies that raised, and when it was a bit easier to raise, there's been probably first of all in either down rounds or bridge rounds or some of them have gone bankrupt, right? So there has definitely been a bit of a cleanup after those heydays. And I think sort of in terms of the returns to you as a founder, I think you should obsess about the problem you're building and want to build a business. I don't necessarily think you should if you're only doing it for the financial outcomes. Most startups don't succeed. And then there are the ones that do. You'll obviously get a big payout, but it's also going to be again, you will have gotten diluted along the way, and you can make a ton of money if you get it exactly right. But then if you're looking if you're just looking at financials, right? You could go be a great working with Salesforce, making a great salary there, or working at BCG where I worked, or working in some other company and get a fantastic salary, right? And that's stable income and something that you think is awesome, or it's great for your family. And that might actually, if you look at it sort of statistically and start multiplying with the success of outcomes and whatnot, you can look at that. And my colleague Jeff in New York posted about this the other day and said if you benchmark those two things in statistics and add that all up, you shouldn't come and build for money. You should come and build because you have a passion for the problem you're solving and nailing that. And then if you do it, then you'll get a big payout. That being said, though, is in the first couple of years of a startup, it can be tight on money, and you're not going to get a big salary. You have your equity as compensation. But when you do get to sort of A and above rounds, you are starting to pay yourself more sort of market equivalent salaries again, right? So there is it doesn't have to be living on sort of a pasta and ketchup, as we say here in Denmark, or the whole journey.
No, and I think that's absolutely fair. Two things that I was thinking about when you said that. Number one is I think it was Naval that said startups fail but founders don't. And that's and then I was thinking about Scott Galloway. The easiest way to get rich is just to be in one of the big tech companies. Here I saw a note about there was this poll of NVIDIA employees, and they were how much is your net worth now? And it was the lowest was $5 million, So it's everyone had an insane growth in that, just being in the right company at the right time. And the right company at the right time, you know, like I thought I started in Salesforce late when we were 17,000 people, and when I quit, it was 89,000 people. So you always, and people that's starting now is still getting really good packages with, you know, real RSU, real money that they can sell after 4 years of vesting. You know, it's so it's, you know, the safe and nice way is probably, you know, going into corporate world in a you know, in a category winning company. If you can find that, then you're gonna have a good little equity package. But it's also like it's also a bit times on lifestyle timing, right? You know, like the luxury of being an entrepreneur is that you're in control of your own time.
Yes.
I think that's so. And then it's, what is richness all about? Then it's, you know, you get money rich, you get time rich, you get family rich. You know, like there's, you know, and if you only stare yourself blind into the money aspect, then you're going to be poor in a lot of other aspects in your life, right?
Yeah, exactly. And now we were just talking about like the start with why, and I think it's actually key and fundamental for each and every individual to figure out like what's your own why. Like if your why is money and, you know, living in the right street and with the right house, with the right car, and, you know, all of these things, then maybe there's one path you should go. And if you have like if you're like a creator and an inventor, like an entrepreneur, and then, you know, you get energy from that, and that's like a good lifestyle for you, then, you know, I that's the way you should go, right? But you probably have to figure out like internally, like, what do you want?
Yeah, what's driving you? What gets you up in the morning? Why are you doing this?
I simply just love working with entrepreneurs and seeing new companies build and building new things and creating new things. So I think that's extremely fun. And now, obviously, I'm an investor now, but we still work with companies so early that we actually try to go in and help them and work with their companies as well. Plus, I've had the luxury of working to build Antler in Denmark, which has also been to some extent a startup, and getting that off the ground. So yeah, I mean, building and growing fantastic new ideas and companies gives me a lot of energy.
So I was thinking like, oh, maybe you want to start something else again because you've done that a couple of times before, right? But it sounds like then a lot of those itches are being scratched right now.
I think they are, even to a greater extent than if I started my own thing. The reason for that is I get to work with so many great people and getting their ideas off the ground, and I really, really enjoy that sort of earlier stages of companies. So yes, I am getting sort of my itches scratched, and that's tremendously fun, right? And then again, also building the Antler in Denmark, and Antler in the Nordics and globally, of course, but sort of specifically in Denmark, building that up and building, you know, working with both building a brand towards the founders, working with like the residents we have, working with the portfolio companies we have, and building a network to the next investors that can invest in this, and going out sort of also raising a fund and building sort of a network with the LP community, and then sort of just in the whole ecosystem. So I think that is also in and by itself almost building a startup on an established platform that is global and is fantastic, but sort of in the local ecosystem, you have to also build the brand.
You have a little bit of a extra backup in your back when you need it because you have that engine, but there's someone that needs to actually do the work on the ground as well, right? What do you think is the you know, the biggest misconception that a founder might have when they're coming into this journey? Like, do they think we don't do this because it's easy. We do this because we thought it was easy, or where do you think they are coming into them?
I don't know if they're really. We try to be really good on educating people before they come in, and we have like intro calls and like all these different things with them. I think some of the founders that come to build a startup and they think that like if we get a board on board that knows something about this market, everything is going to be easier. Advisory board, then everything is going to be easy, right? I mean, a board can definitely guide you and give you input and ask you the right questions. That's what probably the greatest board members do. But you have to do the work. They can maybe open an intro, but you have to walk through the door. You have to do the sales. You have to deliver. You have to close the next funding round. You have to do all of that work, right? There are no sort of shortcuts or easy ways. The way I try to tell it to founders when we start, we're trying to make your startup journey with the Antler platform and all the network and tech credits and co-founder matching and capital and all these things. We're trying to make your founder journey easier, but not easy because it's absolutely hard and it's really a tough job. But we can sort of like by maybe just opening like some doors here and there, helping you find the right first hire, all of these things can make it easier. And of course, also being a good sparring partner along the way, it'll make it easier, but it's not going to make it easy because it is extremely tough.
It is, I say sometimes it feels like I'm just pouring gasoline into the rockets and I know it will, take off, but it's just a lot of energy that needs to be put in before we got lift off.
Sure.
You must see tons of pitches. Can you tell me about the ones that are good or the ones that are not? What does a good pitch involve?
I think it's super, like, it's when you're finding something and the problem is well defined. It's like at that level where you actually, you have finally gotten to some like real problem. Ideally, you've experienced this problem yourself. I mean, not always, because like sometimes innovation can come from outside of an area and into it. But then maybe you've seen that problem as part of your journey somewhere. It's like one of Anders' startup ideas in his phone between sort of like ice cream on subscription and the golf courses in Greece, right? But you've probably gotten inspiration from that somewhere along your journey and gotten that. So it's like something you have identified and something you've said, okay, this is like something I really would like to solve, and you've understood that problem and potentially felt the pain yourself. So having then a simple solution, definitely having some traction around that. Whether you then have, you might not have a product yet, but then at least you've gone out and signed 10 LOIs with customers and that are willing to pay, and you've already put the price point down, and sort of like gotten to that confirmation level that this is a problem that people are also willing to pay for. Seeing that traction, and then of course like some sort of a plan ahead of like, what are you gonna do now ahead? What are you gonna do if and when you get an investment? How are you gonna spend that, and what are the next milestones you want to achieve, and then where will that get you? And then of course ultimately it's the team as well, right? I mean, why should we invest in you guys? What's your unfair advantage in solving this problem? Like, what's the special insight you got? Like, you saw this, you've been working in another industry, saw this way of doing it here, but now you shifted industry and they're solving it in a totally like non-optimal way, and now I'm going to take that and deploy that in this industry. Or like I have, I'm talking to a guy who has, and him and his company, where he has 80,000 followers to his target market on his Instagram account, and that can potentially, take the company and lift it off the ground. So you have like that user base that you have access to. So it's like something special that you have as a team, some unfair advantage that nobody else can have. Like, you're one of 10 people in the world that has researched this to this level, these types of things.
Yeah. I'm gonna get back to the it's so easy to think about like the how can you be an expert of anything?
Yeah.
But it's very quickly that you realize that there's very few other people competing in that niche that you're competing in.
Yeah.
Like who, for myself, like who is a MedPick expert that has done enterprise sales in the Salesforce ecosystem and are loving cold calling? Like then the Venn diagram becomes extremely narrow.
Yeah.
Like even if there's maybe 5 other people in the whole world that is there, who's willing to go all in on it. Yeah. Like it becomes a little bit LOAs for me, like letter of agreement,
letter of intent. Yeah, I mean, so
seems like a comfort blanket. It's like if someone comes to me and is like, hey, don't worry about it, we have an LOA, and I'm like, okay, so that's legally binding, right? Yeah. No, nothing. I would rather have them, put $10 in and say that. And then say, okay, we put $10, and if that you also deliver, then there's an LOA.
Yeah, I totally agree. Right? I mean, again, where you have to think about the stages we're at. Sometimes they don't have anything to sell, and like if they can get that, but that, like, we're trying to always get them to as far as they can towards a sale. And we're definitely also trying to, like, every time we get some of these in the pre-idea stages, we're always pushing them and saying, okay, have you already spoken about price and how they're going to pay? I mean, if they're a pilot customer, you might give them a slight discount, but don't give it to them for free. All of these things, right? So we're trying to get it as close to a sale as we can, and the sort of realistic, but we also have to be a little bit realistic about, I mean, and what can you go out and sell before you have the product, right?
Yeah, so. That's fair. What was the company name that just had their test flight and doing supersonic speed? It's a YC company that went up with an LOA on their pitch day and had signed like Sir Richard on from Virgin and saying like, if you build this plane, we'll buy it, and it was like billions of dollars in LA.
Exactly. It sounds like a super cool company. I wish I knew the name of it. I haven't heard of it, but that's true, right? I mean, getting some confirmation, but I think again you got to look for this as confirmation that this is a real problem that people are willing to. That people want to get solved, and that they're willing to, like, if you can come and solve it for them, they're willing to actually put some capital towards it. Then whether those 10 LOIs then become the actual pilot customers, typically we see that then maybe like out of those, you get like 5 of them to be your pilot customers, but then you at least have gone out and done that research. And by the way, to get your 10 LOIs, you've probably been through like some sort of a sales funnel to get to the customers that were actually willing to put their autograph on a piece of paper. And even if it's not legally binding, it's still like before you sign something, you still like, just think about it a little bit, right?
Exactly. And I mean, it's that a little bit of a reciprocity, which is, influence, one of the key principles. Like, I have now said that I will do something for you. Yeah. So then I have to go back on my word. People don't want to do that either, right? So
no, exactly.
And that's cool. Do you have any stories from like when some pitches that has just come completely wrong, like that is that you see that they're like, what are you even doing here?
I mean, typically we take people in, right, and then we work with them for a period, and then before we put them.
Don't you see it on panels or something like that? Have you been?
Exactly. You see it, right? So I don't think. I mean, I think it's more in sort of like the way of approaching building your companies where you see something, right? And I think it comes to this level when you get to. Sometimes when you think about people who are thinking, not necessarily about, they haven't understood the problem. Maybe once they're like, it's a very superficial problem, where they haven't sort of like done this, like dug deep and actually understood the core of the problem or the core of the use case that they're trying to solve. They're trying to make something general, and then it's going to solve some use cases, but they haven't really understood the customers and like what are they really building. So I think that becomes a problem. I think also then sometimes I just get solutions where I see like I don't understand what they're necessarily trying to solve for, or what it is, or it was a lot of the case when there was like blockchain involved. I think like there was like a lot of people that tried to stick in some blockchain into some pitch at that time when it was a bit of a hype, but then it's like, why do you need blockchain to solve this? Like, what is that going to do extra? Like, it's like, why not just have it on some databases and some servers somewhere? Like, why do you need that? So like, if you overcomplicate something and you can't understand it, and I think there's like 2 levels of me not understanding it. If it's like conceptually, I don't understand it, which is there are probably tons of things I don't understand just to be overall, right? But if I conceptually don't understand it, then that I think is a sort of a little bit of a red flag. If you can't like get to some sort of logic with me where I can at least understand like how you're trying to solve the problem, and then I think there's another level of understanding where it's like so deep techy and nerdy and stuff like that. I understand what you're trying to do. I have no idea like how you're going to do it and like the actual mechanics of that. Don't understand it. And I think like that's okay, right? Because then we can like find some expert that can help us do DD on that if that's the case. But if you conceptually can't like make it like clear to me, like what is this, like how does the cash flow in this model work, and you're just trying to talk around it, then I like fundamentally don't think you understand it, right? So I think those are some of the things. And then there's like another couple of things where we get into sort of like things that we don't appreciate as much. People asking us like, what do you think we should do here? Again, I mean, of course you can like ask me for advice and sparring and stuff, but it's like, what do you want to see here? Like to invest? I mean, it's like, it's not my company, it's your company, own it and drive it. and build that. So some of the things that kind of don't work, and then like if people start talking about the wrong things and like focusing too much on like spending 5 minutes on that they've changed the fonts or done some new layout of stuff. And I mean, of course, if it's a branding business and it's that's the core asset of the business, great. But if it's like if we're sort of at a totally different stage of where we're at and just trying to conceptualize a problem and a solution, then maybe don't spend like 10 minutes talking about that you changed the icons in your presentation.
No, that does make total sense. I see, like, one of the things I see that with salespeople maybe are doing missing a lot is having a clear point of view for, like, why their solution is solving a client's problem and why they're different.
Yeah.
And something that I've been doing some consulting for procurement and helping companies buy software as well, because basically got sucked into that when I quit Salesforce and ex clients are reaching out and asking what's going on with our contract. It's extremely hard for buyers to understand the differences between vendors because everyone is talking in the same kind of buzzwords.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that, clear point of view where you are articulating why you are different and why you are solving this problem in a different way, then you so quickly just become a name and a logo that is, like you could, like I used to say to my teams, like if you can change the name, like if you can change, Antler or Salesforce or whichever name to your competitor in this, like why, then it's not specific enough.
No.
And then you need to dig a little bit deeper. Is there anything in because blockchain, like right now, very low on the hype scale.
Yeah.
Is it, AI very high on the hype scale? Do you see, there's a couple of inflection points, right? Like if you have a societal inflection point, if you have a governmental inflection point, if you have a technological inflection point, you want to have at least one of those because there's I love a good governmental inflection point because, a GDPR use case is a good use case, a compliance use case is a good use case. Do you see any of those in blockchain that is coming up now that could be interesting in building in, or something that is not super hype?
I think sort of first of all, on blockchain, I think it got stuck in a lot. We don't see it as much anymore. I still think there's some Web3 and crypto out there. They're still building. There's the verdict is still a little bit out on how much of an influence is it going to have on the world. I mean, I know the U.S. just made a strategic crypto reserve. Again, maybe Trump paying a little bit back to the people who invested lots of money into his campaign. But anyway, there's like at least some movement in that. I don't think that's going to make it a hype. I think it's still hard to see a bit. I mean, definitely we don't have to mention like AI, right? Super hype. But I do think like if you're looking at all the use cases and everything for that, it's like it seems to be a lot clearer, right? And that is sort of probably going to be the next sort of thing changing society. It is already. And then if there's like things that are coming up that are exciting, I think one thing we will see, and it's like we won't see it until we see it, but it's like when we really get the breakthrough of quantum and we can do like much more computing a lot faster. That's going to be super exciting. And then we have like I think sort of in terms of it might have been people might have said it as, and now right now it would be maybe said a little bit as sort of like hype. But if you look at sort of climate tech and sustainability and impact tech, I think like maybe the hype, and speaking of governmental inflection points, where you like everything pulling back a bit right now. But fundamentally, we haven't changed the underlying problem unless you're sort of a climate denier and don't believe in that. But then the fundamental problems are still there. It's still like we have to solve them, and it's going to be huge problems going forward. So I do think that still that there are a lot of great things there to be solved, and a lot of great opportunities for building fantastic companies. Of course, you can't just build sort of into hype. And again, you're seeing like now with for instance, the digital product passport in the EU being pushed out some years, et cetera. You're seeing some movement in that. There isn't as much urgency for customers. We also saw like with some other sustainability startups we had that like customers started pulling back just a little bit on this. But again, fundamentally the problem hasn't been solved. So the opportunity is still there, or it's still a massive problem that we need to deal with.
It's I was thinking, because there's like on the blockchain part, it's like, okay, if you can change the if you can have like old industries coming into new things, you can then make it real. You know, then it becomes a real problem. But it's like, if you're, you know, I had one friend that is was working on micro lending, and then you had a real use case, because you can see, you can mitigate risk in that lending, because you can see, you know, stuff like that. But it wasn't like, it wasn't at a scale that was big enough for it to take off, right? It's and AI, you know, like you know, who's not using, you know, some type of chat these days? It's
probably
insane.
more people than you'd expect, right? But we're sort of we're definitely the early adopters or fast adopters of that curve. But we have, like, if you go out to sort of a mainstream company in Denmark, and sorry not to kill the argument here, but I think that there's still a lot of adoption to be done.
I 100% agree. And that wasn't my point. But like, my little brother is a chef, and he's now like, you know, like, have you heard about ChatGPT? And I'm like, yes. And he and his boss are like, they just put all the data from the restaurant into like, and I'm like, are you training it? And I'm like, what do you mean training it? Like, oh, you can use a little project, and then you can like upload it. And he's like, no, we're just talking to it. And I'm like, you can do a lot more. And now they've already found out that they could do some efficiencies on some of the products, because you know, oh, here you have a different SKU that is, you know, 10%, and that's massive in the restaurant industry, right? So I think that's super cool. But I also, when I talk to enterprise companies, they have a hard time finding the use cases that really moves the needle. And like the co-pilots and stuff is not necessarily. My thought is that a lot of these AI tools are coming with the premise that they should fix everything. And I am trying to tell, like, my friends when they're asking what I think, like, I don't need you to fix everything. If you can fix like 20%, I will be super happy. Like, if you just go from 0 to 20, that's one working day a week that I'm now not doing that. Like, you know, what, you know, with all the, I'm guessing there's a lot of, if you're not having AI in your pitch, will, you know, you even be invited, but how does these like new companies coming up looking at this? Are they doing the moonshot, or are they trying to like doing, and how do you create moats when it's such a, you know, like when everybody else can copy almost exactly what you're doing? Like,
yeah, exactly. I think, I mean, some of the bigger moonshots are probably some of the ones that started building the big sort of LLMs at the earlier days, with like, you know, OpenAI and Mistral and whatever and whatnot. They're probably some of the ones getting out there. Then you know, the verdict is still sort of out on the long term. Like, how is this landscape gonna shape, right? And then you're trying to figure out, like, are you doing sort of like, are you competing in like which types of the stack of generative AI you're playing in here, right? So like, where do you sit in that space? And obviously you have to figure out something that gives you a unique advantage where you won't just be wiped out, especially sort of if you have like some sort of an application, and then like just OpenAI, they roll out their next update with ChatGPT, and they have like these 8 functions that you can use, and you're, by the way, one of them, your business goes to kind of 0 in a like overnight. So you got to figure out, how do you, like, what is your unique competitive advantage? And of course, extremely difficult in this like very early stages. I mean, it's just like some years old, and like these early stages where they're still trying to figure out where the big boys in the industry are sitting, and like what they're actually rolling out. That being said, we're seeing lots of different companies, like all the way from like some that are rolling out from DTU and building their own sort of tech, and where they're putting together different things, but they've also went out and done like proper research and how you can make, actually we have one company that has done that is like, can read facial expressions, and then based on your facial expressions can adopt how it interacts with you. So you can actually, and you can better from what people are saying, or tone of voice, you can better from the facial expression see their state of mind. So you can actually sort of make it a very, very pleasant speaking partner because you know the state of mind of the person you're speaking to, right? But that's sort of rooted in deep tech. A professor from DTU who put out, and they put together their own proprietary system of this, and then they can sell that to other services that can then use it in sales training softwares, health care, etc. So that's like one example. You definitely have a lot of companies coming in, but as you're saying, it's also about, one thing is about sort of just plotting things into ChatGPT, but it's like a specific use case and like interaction with all your different tools and your workday, and like how do you actually get to activate that, and how can you also secure the privacy of the data that you have that you're feeding into this. All of these different things and elements are stuff people will have to think about. And if you build something where you can sit and have some sort of a way of thinking about solving, again, coming back to solving real problems for real people, then and build that into their way of working, then not only are you actually creating value, but you're also building a moat around your business, because then you're part of their daily workflow, and you don't change your daily workflow sort of all the time, at least.
I was pitching Antler to my cousin the other week. He's been working in sourcing and procurement for the last 35 years. And he says, like, I have so much knowledge in this space, in this vertical. Yeah. And I'm also like, I have ideas of what I would want, like a AI tool to look in this space. Yeah. But I don't necessarily know, like, I can't build it myself. Like and I was like, well, sounds like Antler could be a good program for
totally
you.
Exactly what we can help them solve.
And those verticalizations, I feel like, is maybe like a way of creating a bit of moats as well, right? Because then you have such an expertise in that field.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's it makes sense.
I mean, definitely, we've in the last year's time, we've done many of these. Two that just popped to mind is like one for doing legal work and like being specialized for lawyers, but also building in their way of thinking about legal frameworks, etc. So you can like tailor it to your own legal company. And then one that has sort of in the biotech where they can spit out research papers based on sort of anything available online, but anybody can do that. But then they've also built in where you can have your own test data and test results and build that into your way of publishing papers. So you basically have your own trial set of data that is like not put on the machine learning model, but like some updates and processes that run for that. And then you can get sort of scrape the whole internet and then spit out a research paper with a couple of questions with your own data.
It's just crazy times. Sam Altman said that there's basically two companies. There's the ones that are terrified for the next OpenAI release, and the ones that are excited about it. Yeah. And it's like, just make sure that you're in the latter, because it's, and that's also what like the AI evangelist in Salesforce was saying, with all the LLMs that, like, you can create your own, but does it make sense? Because like, most of it's going to be commoditized. So like, how can you, like, if you're going to build something, just make sure that it's super niche, and don't try to like, Salesforce has a forecasting LLM, like who's going to have the most data to train a forecasting, and they now apply that also to weather forecasting, because it's, like, so
it's Einstein in the works.
Yeah.
I think in whether in the previous or latter category, one thing I think that's cool if you're looking at sort of more of like at the national level is, like, I heard the other day that in Estonia they've just put generative AI on the school schedule for children. So they are going to start teaching or learning about this from a very early age, which I think is just fantastic way of giving, like, instead of like, I think sometimes we can be a little bit scared of like, the pupils just gonna write their papers on this, and if they probably will, but instead maybe let's try to teach them how to use this to be more productive. I mean, the whole workforce is likely going to change because of this. So we need to, why not sort of empower them to be the best versions they can of themselves in the future, as opposed to maybe being more scared about it.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think we're gonna, like, how does it? You have pretty young kids, like when they go after, high school age, and they're gonna stand there and like, I'm either gonna go into apprenticeship, like that kind of route, or I'm going to go into university route, or I'm going to maybe go to entrepreneurial route. Yeah. how do you think their world will look like when they stand there and looking to make a decision?
I think there's a big, it's a very sort of big question, right? I have to be honest right now, I think there are very few people that can probably predict where this is sort of all going to go to that stage. Definitely changed a lot, right? I think we'll be sort of a lot more efficient, like versions of ourselves. Very, very different types of the work being done. I mean, look at right now with Lovable that we also made a bit of investment in, that are like basically you can code. Like you don't need to do anything. I can sit down and code, and I can't write code, but I can like write any sort of a website or whatever type of thing I want to code, right? I mean, so basically, do you need to even learn coding in 3-5 years, or do you just have to conceptualize ideas, or like where we're at? I think it's like a very, very interesting time to be alive, and see where this is all going, and you know what. I feel lucky that I have enough time. On my hands to wait it out a little bit to see which directions I'll send my kids in, because right now I think the only thing I think we can say right now is that the world is definitely going to be very different in terms of like, I mean, now I'm in terms of jobs and the opportunities that they will get into, right? I think the one thing that you can't do as much is still the interaction between people. So anything that has some sort of interaction between people is obviously going to be still there to some extent, or will be there to the same extent. But then again, even listening to the example I just came with, where we have like an AI that can read facial expressions and have a conversation that's probably can sort of read my feelings better than I can read yours. And then based on that, have a better conversation. So it's like there's a human conversation, but there's maybe a better conversation to be had with a Gen AI, like on the specific topic that you want, and like that can challenge you and sort of move with your mood even better, right? So
it's I can't remember his name exactly now. He's the former head of Google in China. He has Lee something. He wrote this book called AI Superpowers, and the first half of the book is basically him like talking about like the difference between U.S. Silicon Valley going after the big ideas and like Chinese companies that is basically a gladiator game and survival of the fittest. And if you let yourself be copied, well, fuck off. You know that you're weak. You know, I'll get out. And then he gets sick. So he basically has cancer, and his doctor tells him that you only have like a 75%, like 25% survival rate on this cancer. You are in stage whatever, and he gets obviously shocked. But then he's a data scientist kind of guy, so he's like, okay, let me do a little bit more of my own research here. And it turns out that doctors are only being taught X variables because it's just so complex to make these prognosis. So when you then actually look at the data for his cancer, you could weight it differently. So when he then pushed that into the computer program that he built himself, he saw that actually, you know, my survival rate is like over 50% because these markers are not as bad. Yeah. And then he was like, AI will help with that, right? You know, you want to have a doctor that gives you the right, you know, things and have access of all the latest information, but you don't want a robot to tell you that you have cancer. No. You know, at least not for a generation or two, right? You know, like, because when the facial expression is better than the human, then, you know, it's going to take a generation or two to move that.
I mean, the guys I'm talking about, they already have it, right? They have a little live technology that they can put out there. It's just, I think it's right now, it's those like when you're having a sort of a real conversation with an AI and like it's reading your facial expressions. I think they're ready right now with the technology that will be sort of more mainstream, and like just think about robots that'll like come and serve you food and can read you like, okay, you're getting upset about me because I didn't do it right, or you know, at the hospital delivering something to you or something. So they already have this technology. It's just like a couple of years ahead of their time. Like when it will be rolled out. So right now they're working with finding pilot customers that they can put this into and then sort of be at the forefront of having the best model for doing this.
I don't dispute that it works. I dispute, you know, with, you know, I'm ready for it. You know, like that's
you're ready for it. Yeah,
because I think the societal change will be the biggest pushback there.
I think you're absolutely right. That is, there's like it takes time. Like again, as we were just talking about, just with general AI adoption, like we're there now maybe, but there's still like a lot of people that need to get a bit more ready with it.
Yeah, no, it's pretty yeah, it's exciting and terrifying at the same time. And then let's see what happens with the singularity. That's gonna be a bit crazy.
And that example that you just gave about the guy and with Google with cancer and the markers, right? I mean, if you look at Corti, the Danish startup that are reading emergency calls, and they're also, as far as I understand, at least, I don't know them besides reading from them, and I've met them a couple of times at conferences, but to my understanding, they are also much better at, like, when you get an emergency call, about figuring out what is actually the emergency and what is actually wrong with this person, than if it's just a live emergency call responder.
Exactly. And then we're back to that kind of thing, like, okay, you don't need, make me 50% better, make me, like, and eventually might be 110% better, but you that transition is super cool.
And people still, like, and to your point about generational change, I think that, you still want to talk to a person on the other end of that call, right? I don't want to talk to a robot, and that will end up sort of going in the circle around it and not understand what I'm calling it, like, or having empathy and emotion about, like, what I'm doing.
But it's getting scary. Like, a couple of years ago, when I was working still in Salesforce, my computer broke, like, and I did something stupid. I put my bag under the sink, not thinking that it was a automatic sink, and obviously it was water, and computer broken, and very stupid. You don't only do that mistake once. Yeah. But I called then Salesforce, and I had already sent an email to support, and then I called, and then this voice answer, "Hey, and is this Anders?" Yeah, it's Anders. "Okay, cool. I have your number here. I see that you sent an email regarding to the ticket number XYZ." I'm like, yeah, it's like, and I'm so stupid. I put it in, and then it interrupts me. It's like, "Okay, please say yes if this is the ticket number." And I'm like, "Oh Jesus, this wasn't a real person." Like, like you get already there that you're like getting a little bit almost awkward when it comes to what's real or not. But you have like you talked about your, what did you say? You called it you called it, where is my note here? Celebrated failure. Yeah, celebrated failure. What's that, and why did you call it a celebrated failure?
I think, first of all, you don't necessarily celebrate failures, right? So it wasn't like we sat down at a party and like and celebrated that we failed. But I think it's at least something we need to look at a lot more here, especially sort of in sort of Denmark and maybe sort of other places in Europe as well. But I think you need to think about, like, celebrating people who try, who don't succeed. I think I think that's more of an American state, right? You see, like, second-time entrepreneurs are much better because they've tried, and their likelihood of succeeding is a lot better. So let's celebrate the people that try, and that may not succeed the first time, but then they potentially keep trying, and then in the second or third time they will potentially succeed, because you also build experience in doing it the first time around. Now, with some of the ones that I have been involved with that did succeed, and that was part of these companies, I know from, like, talking to these founders, is like, when they have been part of an exit, and then, like, sort of a consolidated roll-up, and is still working with that company, but they're like, when we build this company again, or like when we build the next company, we will be so much better at it, because we just know all of these things, just how to do them, and we're not going to do all of these different mistakes and errors along the way. So I think, and you even learn a lot from failing as well, right? So I think that's why we need to celebrate failure. So, of course, especially when you're sort of like building a company and you're taking in sort of investment, and what you have sort of a humble responsibility towards the investors you're taking that money from, they should also know, like, if it's a startup, at least it's sort of a high risk, high return type of investment. But at least sort of, so you don't want to sit down and obviously celebrate, but at least I think we should be sort of better on average as an ecosystem of celebrating the people who have tried and also not succeeded along the way.
Is that as you said, it's a Euro thing. So you think that it's a more of a Nordic thing to like play it safe and not?
I don't think it's a play it safe, like, especially the ecosystem in Denmark is on fire. I usually say I think we're growing fast, and like lots of stuff is happening all the time. I think we had 20-ish venture investors open up in the last 5-6 years, so lots of stuff is going on. And so I think it's not a sort of a play it safe thing. It's more of a, like, I knew you wouldn't succeed, type of a Yenta law type of thing. You shouldn't think you're better than me or whatever. So it's like, haha, I told you so. I think that's sort of it's more of a societal sort of, at least Danish thing.
Yeah.
But obviously it doesn't exist in the startup ecosystem. But I think we even have to, like, we take a bit of our sort of like societal brain with us into the startup ecosystem. And I think we have to be better at just, giving a high five to the people who tried and giving them some encouragement and saying, hey, I mean, cool. Now you just, like when someone don't succeed, I'm just like, hey, cool. You just like 50% increased your chance of succeeding the next time. Because like when you're a second time founder, you're much more likely to succeed.
100%. And there's so much stupidity that you do as a first-time founder, like just like just shredding that skin as a second-time founder must be insane. But I think also it's sometimes we should be a little bit also here in Nordics. We have this. We're small countries, so we have like a lot of system around us. So it's actually a very nice place to start, a company, because like, sure, in the early days in Vuggestue in Denmark, it costs quite a bit to send your kids there. But then when they start going to school, it doesn't cost any money. Like it's a lot of these things that if you were not in this environment, you would increase your risk as a founder, right? So
you have a bigger safety net sort of overall, right? And good infrastructure.
So what was the number one thing that you learned then in your celebrated failure? What was it that you took with you in your 2 exits after that?
What was it that I took with me? I think, again, coming back to finding product market fit is like just key and instrumental. We didn't find product market fit, and like that's one specific example I'm thinking about here. And it's like when you're trying to, we tried insanely about finding product market fit, but we never found it. So we were trying to, so what we were trying to solve for was like probably a problem, but we just couldn't solve it properly. So I think that is it again, like just, and we did spend all the time searching for product market fit. So I think we did I think we did that right. But yeah, and then, that would be it. Like try to like religiously spend your time on making sure that the product market fit. I think here it was like the problem wasn't properly defined. So we had to, we just had, so it was really tough finding a solution that worked to that.
Because it's a lot of time when you hear product market fit, it's almost a little bit diffuse, it's like, when or like, if you hit 10K MRR, then you're gonna, then you can feel, then you're at least there,
Yeah.
But I almost feel like you can, if you have enough time, if your problem is a painful enough problem for an organization or an individual, then it's just a matter of time and effort, like to get to that. Like you're like you can CPR your way to 10K MRR. Like
for sure, but then it doesn't become about the 10K MRR. It becomes about the growth rate of that. Like how long. I mean, obviously, it's again the first 10K MRR. Like I mean, some companies got extremely fast to their first whatever metrics. Others take longer. Good example, acquired by Salesforce, Slack is they're building video games first, if I remember correctly, and then like build Slack for the internal communication. So if you look at their traction of takeoff, it was like years before they got to that. And some will need that sort of like pivoting around before they really find it. But it becomes about like the growth rates when you get to 10K MR or 100K. It's like that is what you'll start looking at, because it's fundamentally the investors are not investing into that cash flow or that
they want to
get to 1 million to 10 million MRR and so forth, right?
Yeah. And also, like when you have 10K MRR, then you also have some cash to spit into the engine, right? So it's like if you're not growing in a good rate, then you definitely have, then you're solving the wrong problem. But it's also that then it's made, well, how many iterations can you do in the early days to make sure that you get there, right? So it's and the only way of getting there is to speak to people, then I guess, or.
Exactly. It's like getting out, talking to customers and understanding what are their pain problems or pain points. And then sort of like really obsessing about that, but also understanding like I think I just spoke to one of our founders who pivoted away from his original problem, was trying to through invoices and figure out sort of like the emissions of companies and making it the calculation of like CO2 emissions that you have to report on scope 1, 2, and 3. Or it's probably like scope 3 they were working with. So if you look at and what he said, it was like extremely easy, and that's coming back to like getting people to commit to wanting to do something. But then like when they then had it, like converting customers and like getting them to actually sell, because everybody like has to. It's like a problem, I want to solve it, but do you really then have budget, etc., to actually put towards this? So he pivoted away, and now they're sort of building something like a different life cycle assessment tool, which is like modern with Gen AI and everything. So you don't have to be a consultant to build a life cycle assessment report. So they've done that, and they're like doing well with that. But again, coming back to like, this was like everybody was telling, it's a little bit like almost like the mom test of like, your mom doesn't want to tell you that like what you're doing is not nice type of thing. But here everybody actually wanted to somehow solve this problem, but did they then really want to commit to that in your tool afterwards?
It's also, I think the green part is and circular economy and stuff. It's like, so you see time and time again that people are saying that they want to do things, but they're not willing to just to say like actually put money behind it. It's every time you can choose to have 5-day delivery. Because then you have lower CO2 emissions. Consumers are not choosing that option. They say next day. They want it now, and it's plant a tree and then or get free. Like they and then you ask them, what do you prefer? Would you want to do that? I want to do that, and then their actions is doing something completely different.
I totally agree, and that's why I think like when you are designing, if you are designing for something, that again I think that the problem about climate hasn't been reduced because of like the changes in government and sort of governmental winds blowing. But if you want to design for something that needs to solve for the climate crisis, I mean, you think you have to do making it as equally convenient as the existing solutions and at the same cost parity of like other solutions. So like if you're getting to there with like there isn't a trade-off, but I'm like doing the same thing, and I'm by the way also doing something that's good for the economy or for the climate, then that's when you're gonna have like product market fit in that space. But you can't compromise too much in that. At least sort of like then in the early days of it, obviously can be a bit sort of over cost or other things. I mean, but then look at sort of the example of Tesla, not as sort of the most popular brand to talk about these days, but with Musk that first built the Roadster because he knew he couldn't, like he had to build like an expensive car to begin with because it was going to be higher, like the sort of the economics of like building would be better over time. So first that, then the S and Model X, and then the Model 3, and now like let's see if there'll be a Model 2 or whatever they're going to call it, and whether it'll come out. But at least sort of building down that cost curve to get it more and more adoption to it. And so
and I think like in the green space, it's also like, should you even go to the consumer with this? Like it's maybe you have a big impact if you can make it on the governmental or company scale, because then it's more people that you're impacting at once instead of having the consumer sitting with the bag on that, maybe.
Definitely. I think it's like a push that needs to come from all around. You can see, right, like legislation was driving some, but I mean, there's also a large consumer demand, and from potentially younger generations are still having some of that, right? So
yeah, I think the carbon credits part is like I think they are. That's what I think is the most interesting part of that space, because it's like it has been a lot of like greenwashing statements before, because they knew the people that were sitting in these positions knew that they wouldn't be in those positions in corporate world 10, 15 years from when they said it. So they're like, Lufthansa came with this insane claims and stuff, and now they're like either like just disappearing from their websites, or they're getting redefined. But with some of the governmental work that is doing in EU and stuff, they are also like there are regulations that are changing and making this more real, and also technology is changing. Like so, taking carbons from the ocean and from the air, and like, you know, it's really like there's some cool stuff happening there, but it's a big problem to solve.
Definitely. I mean, we did with our recent residents. We were at BCG's Boston Consulting Group here in Copenhagen at their office, and we did a what we call a sprint. So where you co-work together with people that we put the entrepreneurs into groups of with people they don't know, and then they present something for the next day. And we did this on sustainability. So there was like different problem areas, and we looked at in the energy, textile, and then built environment space for like the different things. And we were looking at like what are the different technologies that should get us to sort of net zero emissions in these areas, and just looking at those being at sort of cost parity. And you can see there are definitely like I mean there are lots of technologies. I mean we know, you know, we have the technologies available to get there. Some of them needs to get rolled out and scaled faster. Some of them need to get the cost parity before because again, like with the Tesla example, else they won't come down in price sort of enough that sort of it'll have general adoption. So, but there are a lot of things we already know what to do. We need to sort of just also get even more entrepreneurs to work on it and get it out there and scale it faster.
I think that's an interesting, like one making something that is not valuable, like, you know, like that's something that is going in my mind a lot, especially when, you know, like the plastics that we have everything, you know, like it's we're drinking from plastic bottles here, you know, like it's just as soon as it's been consumed, it's not valuable anymore. And it to the point that it's, you know, we have nice systems in place here in the Nordics, but in the US, like if you even go and collect a container full of plastic, you don't get any money for it because it's just like useless. So how, you know, like what is it that can be done to make something? And the answer so far that I come up with is art, because like then it's just they can become a movement of the perception of value, and then you can build on that. But that will be that's, you know, my retirement project maybe, like when I get my nut. That's
playing golf in Greece on the resort of Greek golf courses.
Exactly, and just pick the Mediterranean plastic out of the sea. What's the, you know, like you've done a lot of cool stuff in your career. What is it that you're most proud of?
That's a good question. I think overall, just as I guess it's like having the courage to follow like my passions and sort of like trying to navigate towards that. I think sort of a couple of like if you were to say pivotal moments I've had is probably like when I like at one point when I was working as a consultant. I mean, there was like probably a career I could have gone into big corporates or gone into sort of like a different route, and I chose to sort of jump and axe my salary into decimal points, and then start building a company that we then build. And I was actually sort of proud of that. We built a digital marketing agency. This was way back when you know people weren't as aware of buying Google ads, and I mean you can buy ads on Facebook yet, etc. So it was like in the early days of digital marketing. And when and we built that into a company with like from zero to I think we had sort of like 25, 30 FTEs and maybe 50 employees overall, and built that into a company that somebody else sort of bought and acquired. I think that was my like the first thing I was part of starting as a company, and I think that was pretty cool. I remember walking into the office one morning, and I was like the first one there, like 6 a.m. or getting an early start to the day. And you just look up and you're like, okay, we have like all these workstations for people, right? And it was like, you know, we created that from nothing, and we're actually employing a bunch of people and paying them and delivering value to some customers for that. I think that was sort of that was a pretty cool experience.
And have you, if I ask you what's your best and worst advice that you've gotten professionally, like which pops up into your mind?
That's also a very good question. I think if you look at it from at least I think one of the things that I think we had this thing at BCG that was like chart your own course. So that was like one of the sayings, you chart your own course. And I think that is at least something that I've done and like followed my sort of own why and like what I think is fun and to do and gives value. And I think one of the things, like if you think about it, that I have sorry, I just lost that thought for half a second. But if you think about it, like you'd always get like a lot of the organization have been very feedback driven, so we always get feedback, and it's like some of the things is like always the same things you get feedback on, and it's just like you also just gotta like acknowledge the what are your strengths, and then sort of like what are your development areas, and I think if you can find a way of playing your strengths as opposed to trying to like fix the areas where you're not the best, then I think you can get a lot further if you try to cater around that. I think you're setting yourself up for more success. So that's at least one of the things I've thought about is like I know what I'm good at. I'm going to try to surround myself with people that are like in sort of complementary. Just like we look for founder teams, I try to find myself in teams where I have people who can solve for some of the skills of like some of the areas where I don't excel as much or I don't enjoy working with them as much. So trying to set that up.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I have a love-hate relationship with feedback.
Yeah.
My wife says that I'm horrible at it. I agree, but I still want it because I know that I get better of it.
Yeah.
Whenever time someone from HR comes and says, feedback is a gift, I want to punch them in the face. But I also like feedback. Feedback is good. Give it to me and then walk away, and then we can talk about it later when I have been able to, actually acknowledge it and don't go into attack mode because that's one of my weaknesses. I want to answer and handle this objection now.
Exactly.
Are you saying that I was too loud in that meeting, or I was I was assertive? So it's feedback is a gift is probably one of my least favorite.
I'm a bit the same, so I can definitely see that. Sort of like when reflecting, I would like to take it back and reflect, and then I also acknowledge.
What so if someone is a first-time founder and would be like, okay, some generic feedback, one good tip of advice that you see sets these founders of these founders that does this win, the others that doesn't. What would you say?
It's like typically this is like a general thing, so it's not like my piece of advice to anyone, but like focus on like nail distribution. Think about like how you're gonna get your product out there, talk to customers, make sure that you're solving a real problem. But so I think if you haven't, like some people will sit and build a product for, I don't know, a year and then like go out and like put it in the market and hey, nobody wanted to buy it. I mean, then you've just wasted a year of your time. You could have spent like 4 weeks going out talking to customers, understanding it was a real problem. And then think about that. And then again, like once you've then solved and fixed the real problem, then also think about distribution. Like how are you going to get this out to customers? How are you going to scale a lot? People, they typically think that, hey, if I have a great product, people will just buy it. I think those are people who have not tried sort of either digitally or sort of physically selling stuff before, because it's like not super easy to get sales done. So those are two pieces of advice, like, focus on a problem that, is real and understand that problem. And then the second piece of advice, I know we only asked for one, but here's the bonus one, would be think about how you get distribution.
It's interesting how hard it is to like, I know this, but it's also interesting to see like the focus part, how incredibly hard it is. And like I try to ask myself like every day, like what is the one thing I need to do today to move the needle? But still, even if I ask myself that, it's so easy to get sucked into things that is important but doesn't move the needle. Like it's I think that's for me the hardest part about entrepreneurship is to be able to sequence things to get it done quickly and then go out in the market and sell, because like your product is never gonna be done.
No.
But if you don't get revenue in, you're gonna be done.
Yeah.
But
it's extremely hard. Like being a founder, you have to balance that tactical execution with that visionary thinking as well, especially if you're like going out and figuring out you every day, building your product, or like hopefully going out talking to customers about what they want and understanding a problem, then building a product and then figuring out how to get some distribution. And then we have some distribution and some MRR, what you have. then going out, you have to talk to investors and you have to get up into the helicopter and the big vision about what we're doing, but you also have to talk about like all the execution you've already done and sort of like the middle stage of like what are you going to do if we do invest and that next level, right? So you have to really split your mind on a lot of different levels as a founder. That's also super tricky. And
yeah, and I think if I could go to the store and buy a trait that I would be better at, I would like to get a bag of task switching capabilities, because like especially now in like an early day founder, like if I could have just be quicker and going from product development to marketing to PR to legal to accounting to contract to sales, like those would be a nice trait. But I found out that you just have to block instead and sequence and then stop and then do a next sequence. That's the only way to do it.
Exactly. I think when we talked a little bit earlier, you mentioned this, like also like with your to-do list of like making a to-do list that can actually get done in a day and like adding time allocation to that. I think that's like super good, right? Because else you end up, as you said, stressing yourself out because you're putting a week's work into a day, and again, there's no timelines to this, so there's like it's not really a plan. It's like it is a to-do list, right? You need to put it into plans and also put it into these elements of. See some of the best, like some of the great founders we invest in, they also try to think about, okay, now we're building, now we're doing this, like we're building product right now, then we're building like in a sort of an API solution, and then we're building our sort of a web sign up form where you can go in and like buy it yourself. But like with API solution, we're building into like other people can put it into their products, and then we're going to get mass distribution fast, and then we're going to build after that, we'll build this. And every time you're then like working on that next step, you're always like already in the process of preparing the next, and then like, okay, that will lead to that, and that will lead to that, and then by the way, when we're there, we have enough MR to go out and raise our fundraising round, so we'll get to that. So that's the next step, and then like always having that sequence of like things that you need to focus on in the right order. And now it's not just like an hour here and there, but like more like here's like the month that we're doing this, and then like 3 weeks we're doing that, and then and building on top of that to get to that. I guess it's sort of like the critical path to the milestone you want to achieve. And again, like funding in and by itself should never be a goal, and it's not a measure of startup success. It's a measure of startup success is the growth that you're getting, like the customers that are love using your product, right? That's the measure of success. But if you are targeting that fundraising round, like sequencing that all up so it like adds up with the time you have and resources you have towards that, and like what do you need to do in the right order, and like how much of it.
Yeah, like it's there's such a cliche that it's not the destination, it's the journey. But anyone who really wants to understand that can just start doing their own business, because then you're forced to enjoy the journey. Because if not, you're fucked. Like it's,
exactly.
So.
You have to do it. I mean, it's there are like so many ups and downs. Like what I typically tell like people who have like that are thinking about entrepreneurship who haven't done it before. Like when you ask people like or ask me, I think it's like it's an upward growing, like hopefully if your startup is successful, it's like an upward journey, right, where the growth graph is growing. But the variance around that graph is tremendous, right? I mean, one day you feel like the king of the world, and the next day you feel like this is never going to work. And then it's like, it's up and down around that, but hopefully sort of with an upward trending curve.
Yesterday I was struggling. Also, probably because I had my birthday celebration on Saturday, and I'm too old and have small children, so I'm not used to going
belated
out.
Happy birthday!
Yeah, thank you. But I was just like didn't go my way yesterday, in general. And then today I had this amazing meeting, and I'm like swagging out of the home office, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have a podcast interview. It's gonna be amazing. Like it's just, if you want to be the king or the in the ditch, just go on that journey. But it's it is an amazing journey to be on. It's such a privilege to be able to. But to go, like, I went from being part of one of the biggest software companies in the world to now being potentially the smallest software company in the world. That is also like there's levels to the extreme. And but it's been a lot of fun. Anything else, Michael, before we wrap up?
No, I mean, it's amazingly fun having this conversation. I always think it's like fun to talk about. I think, and I mean, again, if you are thinking about starting a business and you're sitting out there, I think like the the best time is probably right now. I mean, like of course you have to like think about all your setup needs to be right for it, but I think people always sort of like sit there and think about like when this just happens and that just happens, then it'll be the right time. And of course you can't sort of ignore facts and reality, but there's probably like now is a really good time to start if you're thinking about that, right? To go out there, build the experience, get it, and then hopefully succeed with it.
I think, and I also think like Antler is a good forum. Obviously, it's really hard to get into. Only the best will get through the funnel. But it's it's also getting that hand holding and a little bit of validation if you're onto something good. And when I talk to some of the Antler founders, they're also like it's nice because you have the first founding. It gives you a little bit of breathing space. So if like I think a lot of people can be worried, like, okay, well, I have a family at home, like I need to, like, yeah, you're not going to get an amazing salary when you're, but if you don't go on a vacation for 2 years and you have maybe a partner that works, then, Antler can give you like some coverage for the mortgage, in the first year and stuff. So I think that's, because that's, I think one of the biggest objections when I hear people are, oh, should I go? Oh, well, I have my monthly salary. It's safe. It's that. But when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, second best today.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's it, right? And it's not necessarily about building with us, but if you are thinking about entrepreneurship per se, then it is. And of course, if you are thinking, then yes, we have a bunch of great entrepreneurs that you can potentially co-found with.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Thank you very much for sitting down. And that's the pod.
Perfect. Thanks.